Well, you guys ask me all the time about ways that you can disciple your young children, and I want to tell you about something I found that I think you're going to love. I am always searching for curriculum that's theologically solid, rich in apologetics, and wait for it, easy to use. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about the Answers Bible curriculum for homeschool from my friends at Answers in Genesis. This amazing program covers the entire Bible in just 4 years, and it was created specifically for kindergartners through fifth graders to be taught at the same time, which is going to save you time and simplify your day. You guys are going to get quality that you expect from AIG, and it's deep, fun, packed with truth, and designed to equip your kids to defend the faith. If you're ready to try it, head on over to answersbiblecurriculum.com/Heidi and download a free lesson to get started. That's answersbiblecurriculum.com/Heidi. Well, hey, everybody, this is Heidi St. John. Welcome to the Heidi St. John podcast. You guys might be noticing I'm not in my normal location today. I am really blessed to be here in Franklin, Tennessee with Rebecca and Gabe Lyons. A lot of you guys are familiar with their work. They have a brand new book out called The Fight for Us, Overcoming What Divides to Build a Marriage That Thrives. This is going to be a fantastic conversation, and I'm glad you guys are here for it. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Today's podcast is being sponsored in part by my friends at the Functional Medical Institute. Check them out at homeschoolhealth.com. These guys are healing people from the inside out, and I hope you guys will check out what they're doing. Dr. Mark Sherwood's going to be back on my show to be answering your questions. If you want to send him a question, go to HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday. Well, I'm really excited because I am here in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'm a super fan. I'm trying not to fangirl too much over these guys, but Rebecca and Gabe Lyons are both best-selling authors and speakers. They speak on the issues related to family and culture. I was just talking to Rebecca a few minutes ago about just some emotional health issues. You guys know my story. I've shared it so many times here at the show of just dealing with anxiety and sort of the stigma around that in the church, and my firm belief that God has healing for you. And so I love these guys. I love their passion. We're going to spend some time talking a little bit about marriage today. And I was going to say, welcome to my studio, but I'm in yours. So
welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, guys. Thanks for letting me do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks
you.
for making it easy. And we've really respected so much of your work and all that you do to help so many families and moms and all of us. So thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. And it's just, like I said in the intro, I'm like a super fan. So this is really, really, really thrilling for me. Years ago, when I met my friend, Dr. Dobson, I want to say it was like maybe 17 or 18 or 19 years ago. I can't remember now. He told me, he said, Heidi, if you and your husband decide to stay in full-time ministry, you got to minister to the family because the family is what's under attack in the culture right now. Mm-hmm. It's marriage that's taken a hit. We remember Barack Obama was in office when gay marriage was legalized, and Barack Obama famously lit the White House up in the colors of the gay pride movement and said, today we can say that our country has been made, our union has been made a little bit more perfect. Mm-hmm. And I was in Palm Springs the day that announcement came down, and I just looked at my husband. I thought all of heaven is just weeping because marriage is the cornerstone.
Right.
And you've seen it, I'm sure, under attack in the last several years.
Yeah, marriage is something I think few of us understand even the history of how marriage started to be taken apart. You got to go back to 1970 when Ronald Reagan first signs into law in California. No fault divorce. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of conservatives, laud Reagan for so many things, but don't understand how much that was the beginning of us starting to view marriage as a contract between adults that no longer was going to care about the children. Mm-hmm. And the government's interest in marriage has always been connecting children and generations to parents. Mm-hmm. And so the moment that happened, it set up 2015 because now our culture, our society just said, look, marriage is about two adults being happy together.
Yeah, when you're not happy, then be done.
Yeah, it didn't have the bigger vision that we know from a Judeo-Christian heritage that marriage carries as covenant commitment that's going to tie generation to generation and blessing to blessing. And so I think, I remember walking through that season as well. I had 3 years earlier been with Obama in the Oval Office having a conversation about his stance on gay marriage because
out of town.
Yeah, it was a interesting story. I write about it in my book, Good Faith, where we'd been engaged with the White House on some different issues, and there was a moment where it happened pretty quickly, where he had switched his position and decided to become a proponent for gay marriage. And I wrote a letter. I had several key evangelical leaders sign it, got it to him, and within a few days he said, I want you to come meet in the Oval Office to talk about this and bring 2 or 3 others. So I had Tim Keller, who of course was someone who I knew could carry the weight of this better than myself, Louis Giglio, and Joel Hunter, who was his spiritual advisor. And I just remember that day, like our point there wasn't, we said to him, look, we disagree with your theology, clearly, but you also have an opportunity to speak to this nation and help this nation understand that there's going to be 2 different views on this, and that's not going to change. Yeah. And we need to get along and understand how Americans are going to see this differently. And Tim Keller, I just remember him sitting on the couch across from me and urging the president that you need to understand the demographics. Like in New York, it's Muslims, Jews, like these are people of the book. They're never going to read this book to interpret it in some new theological, quote unquote, progressive way that makes this okay. And so this is going to be a, intractable issue that's not going away. Lead us. You have the ability and the voice of the gay rights community, the women's community. We need somebody to step out. And
he did step out already.
Yeah,
he
that
stepped
did not
out in
happen.
all the wrong ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that moment for me was very personal because I knew we had tried to argue, we tried to stand in that place.
Did it grieve? It must have just grieved you.
Yeah, it did.
Well, because he was so poised to be one who could bridge. He was the only president that could have that potential to do that, to go from one stance to another while he's in office in that entire time. And so I think there's probably a part of him that wants to appeal to the goodwill of all, but there's a lot of pressure on both sides as well. And so as politics goes, here we are. And it's unfortunate, too, because like Gabe said, a covenant is about, a covenant is a commitment to stay together under God, whereas a contract, right? A contract prepares you to separate. It protects you when you do separate. It infers you will separate. And so even just the theology around a marriage covenant that God ordains or a civil union that man creates, those aren't looked at the same. Those aren't revered the same. And so I think it's important to note that as Christ followers, we still come back to covenant.
Yeah, I know, my first public engagement on that topic was 2012. Prior to meeting with the president, I went out to Stanford University to debate Gene Robinson, who was, the first Episcopal gay bishop. Yeah. And they were having a 10-year celebration of him being put into that position.
Openly gay.
Yeah. The first one. And so I was kind of the sacrificial lamb. They said, we want to invite somebody in who disagrees with his point of view to have a conversation at Stanford, where you're surrounded by people that were pretty much on the side.
You were like Charlie Kirking before Charlie Kirk was doing it.
Like Charlie on Gavin Newsom's podcast.
Right.
So I went into that situation, but I remember it really prepared me. And saying to those college students, and I felt there was an empathetic listening as I was communicating to them, like, so many of you don't believe in marriage today because of how this moved to become a contract. And many of you have grown up now with parents getting divorced. You're the ones that are suffering the pain because we changed what the definition of marriage is. And so I appeal to you, let's not do that again because the unintended consequences aren't this year. It's 20 years from now. It's 30 years from now. It's the life that you're now living where you feel that vacuum is missing because you didn't have 2 parents in the home. And so it's a tough topic, but one I would say too, what I'm encouraged about is how much the church, for the majority of the church, has really held the line on this. And I felt helped people think well about this theologically and understand why we hold to biblical sexual ethics and why that does bring more life, more flourishing. It's been that way for a reason. And so I've been encouraged to see over the last decade that, the churches that have changed their views on that tend to decline in attendance, support, they kind of fall apart. That hasn't been a growing movement. And that's been good to watch.
The key phrase that was said so often then is that we were on the wrong side of history, right? That there was now, you imagine the hubris of that statement, right? Like that for centuries now everything's changed and definitely going forward that way.
Centuries worth of our understanding was just stupid.
And yet the common sense of going, hey, if this movement takes off, then your seed stops with you. So what kind of future do you even have? What kind of a generational line comes after you? Nothing. And so it's very short-sighted to go like, we're going to live for this moment and for this, for today, our attraction or are identifying today, and we're not even thinking about a generation coming after us. Like, history stops. So now I think it's like anything. Things trend in one extreme or the other, and it's interesting to watch that in real time.
Yeah, I think that, I live you guys are, right here in beautiful Franklin, Tennessee, and while Nashville is a little bit going crazy, you're kind of insulated here, I think, a little bit. I live in Crazyville, USA, just outside of Portland, Oregon. I grew up there. I've watched as that city has been in decline now for decades. And a lot of what we've seen happen in the city, I think what you're saying, Rebecca, and I kind of want to touch on it, is I think we have hit a tipping point. I think we've hit a tipping point because of the argument of transgenderism. I think even normal people, when I say normal people, I mean people that don't have what our Judeo-Christian background or maybe even our religious or sexual ethics are looking at this going, okay, this actually isn't working.
Yeah.
And something that you guys have been kind of touching on for the last couple of minutes here makes me think about the loss of two parents in the home, right? A mother and a father. The children really need, God designed us for human flourishing, right? And he's given us the rules of engagement. And they were, for this reason, a man should leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife, and the two should become one flesh. And ever since then, Satan has warred against that. And in the United States, after the advent of Oberfeld versus Hodges and, gay marriage becomes, inculcated into our culture, we've really seen a decline in the family. We've seen children are suffering now. And you guys come onto the scene now with a book about marriage when literally marriage is under attack. And, I hope we can touch on this too, right? IVF and the idea now that children don't need a mother and a father. And what does it really matter? And it's just a contract. But you're saying, no, it's not a contract. It's a covenant. And it really was made to help us as we navigate what's going on in the culture. You break down the building block of family, starting with marriage, and you got a culture in decline.
Yeah.
Yeah, we believe so passionately in God's idea of marriage and the enemy's desire to destroy it that we really open the book talking about this idea that you're going to think in a marriage that your spouse is your enemy, and we want to remind you that they're not.
Right.
That's actually a ploy of the enemy to destroy, to create isolation, to move you down different paths where you buy into the lie that this just is what it is. It's always going to be this way. We'll get along. It'll be fine. We'll stay married, but we won't thrive in it.
But we won't love it.
Yeah,
Right.
we won't love it.
Yeah.
We'll just do it out of duty. And we're saying, no, God has such a bigger vision for this, but it is going to require a fight. It's not going to be easy. It's going to require daily submitting yourself to one another, humbling yourself. It's going to erase your pride. It's going to sanctify you into a new type of human being. But this is God's vision of marriage, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And anytime you bump into it, whether it's another couple, maybe people are hearing this and they're like, yeah, I know a couple where it seems like their marriage is so healthy or they're thriving or their family. When you bump into that, you're bumping into a picture of the gospel and what God's vision was for us to be united and for the church. And so it's a beautiful vision that we know marriages today are feeling so much pressure and they're getting so much bad information and advice and noise, especially through our social
And
media
they're hurting.
algorithms and feeds, and it can really feed into that you're a victim versus recognizing that, no, you've probably got some hurt and pain, but God wants to help heal you of that. And part of what his vision for marriage is that your spouse is probably going to be the pathway towards that healing with his help.
Yeah, our spouses are a mirror. They're this close, and they reveal what is in us that God wants to heal, and we would rather not see those things,
Or we'd rather use it as a weapon.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We'd rather avoid those things, move forward, or just grow distant because it's too painful to confront those childhood wounds or whatever that looks like that has no resolve, and whatever is unhealed in origin story or any past relationships. Wherever you go, there you are, and you bring all of that with you into the new relationship. And so sometimes these things don't really surface fully until you are married, because there has never been someone so in your business than in that relationship.
Yeah.
And you just can't hide. You can't dodge the stuff that starts to come up when the pressure cooker turns on, or like you can be very pleasant when you're dating and even maybe the first few months of marriage, but at some point there will be something that is triggered, that is ignited. And then all of a sudden there's a little bit of a dance here that we talk about in the book, this dysfunctional dance, which is the way we are all prone to respond to stress.
Okay, well, let's talk about that for a second, because I'm assuming you guys have been married for 28 years. You got 4 children. 2 of them are special needs. I'm assuming that the pressure's been turned up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're talking from experience. So give me an example, of a situation that you realize, oh, hey, I got a trigger that, you just triggered me. And then how do you identify that and work your way through it?
Yeah. Well, there's 4 types of dances that we respond to based on temperament, but also on just even those past wounds. And so they are silent, intense, avoidant, or anxious. In fact, we have a quiz. We've already had a lot of couples take it. And it's funny what the results are, because you might be the same, or you might have your own version of it. But in general, the ones that are scoring the highest are intense. And then the next is silent. It's so interesting that even in conflict, we live in the extremes. And for both of us, we are intense. We learned that very quickly a few weeks into marriage.
You guys
actually.
are like, we're hashing this out.
Yeah.
We're doing it now.
It's always on the table. We think our opinions matter more than they should, and we're okay kind of fighting it out. And that in unhealth, that's not good, because you end up demolishing one another in the process of trying to be right, versus the healthy response to that is understanding that intensity also has a passion. And when you can combine that to recognize each other's skills, and her opinion's probably generally better than mine when it comes to our children, she's got an intuition and a way of seeing that I
Which
need to
really God gives to women.
Yes.
He does, yeah.
Right, so I can fight it with all my opinions from my origin story of how I grew up, or I can embrace that she's got wisdom in that category, and vice versa. She might lean on me a little bit more for some direction setting and where our family's headed, and what I sense God's doing in the world, and how we prepare for that, and she submits into that. But it took us a long time to understand that this is our skills, our strengths, our mutual friends, the Beveres, John and Lisa. They were a big part of a conversation we had many years ago, where we were asking them questions about their marriage, because they're 2 pretty intense people.
They're pretty Sicilian.
Yes.
Yeah. I was just having lunch with Lisa, and she was telling me about a conversation she was having with someone recently, and she said it was all she could do not to step back and say, I'm Sicilian.
I know.
Right?
They're
you
the best.
You can imagine the fire in that house.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And they've been very honest about that, which we were really grateful for, because they partner in obviously parenting, but then in their vocational work is so overlapping in a lot of ways. Ours is too. And we recognize that. We're like, we need someone a few years ahead of us. We have worked together most all of our marriage. We both have passionate personalities, and we think it's a moral issue when it's not. It's just right. It's not right or wrong on how you load the dishwasher. It's just different, right? It's a preference. And that helped diffuse. But John, I remember him one day just saying, you have to learn to celebrate each other's strengths. You have to learn to know, like, Gabe has a gift of faith that I have to borrow from. I have to lean into. I might have a gift of maximizing or strategy that he goes, I hadn't thought about it that way. That makes a lot of sense. But when we start to kind of honor that with one another, or ask questions because we trust that person is a little more wired for that. It's not that I'm right or he's wrong. It's just that we are now able to recognize those strengths, lean into them, and pair those things together.
It's beautiful. And that's God's heart, right? It's God's heart that he would bring you with your unique skill set, and you, Gabe, with your unique skill set, and kind of bring you guys together. I mean, I've been teaching on marriage out on the road now for almost 20 years. And because I grew up in the 70s, right, watching the superheroes, I'm always like, you guys remember the Wonder Twins, right? It was like Wonder Twin powers, activate, right? I feel like that's what God does in marriage. Like he's going to bring me and my husband together. Jay and I are very different. I don't think you guys have met my husband yet.
We haven't.
He's an extraordinary human being. That. He was when I met him, he was a lead singer in a Christian rock and roll band that was traveling around the country, and they were opening for Petra and doing all kinds of cool things. And so he's like this. He was the front man, right? Incredible voice, amazing guitar player, and he is very soft spoken. Like you get the man off stage, and he's just happy to, putter around the house and kind of quiet. And I'm just like this all the time, right? But you bring the two of us together, and we noted very quickly in our marriage that the things that brought us together will also be the things that could threaten to tear us apart if we weren't willing to give grace to each other. Like the thing that I really loved about him when we were dating, which was so sweet, right? He's playing guitar all the time. after, a year and a half into our marriage, I'm like, could you put that down for 5 minutes and just talk to me, right? Because we're trying to have this conversation. He's like, like, stop. Like, it used to be sexy and now it's just annoying.
Yeah.
And I think that the enemy really does want to do that. Take those things that we loved about each other when we were dating and turn around and use it against us. And I'm imagining with your personalities and with your kind of fiery, both of you, with this sort of these skill sets that are, different, but you respond to stress in a similar way. I'm imagining that you've really had to talk this stuff out. You guys know how passionate I am to see parents discipling their children in the Bible. And while it doesn't have to be complicated, it does have to be intentional. That's why I'm excited to introduce you guys to the Illuminate Bible series from my friends at Lifestone Ministries. This is a Bible curriculum that's designed to grow with your child from first grade all the way through high school. So whether your child is just starting to read or asking deeper questions about faith and culture, Illuminate meets them right where they are and helps them build a lasting relationship with Jesus. Each week, you'll walk through a simple 5-step approach. You'll look at a Bible story, check out the context around it, see how it connects to the rest of Scripture, study the theology behind it, and find out what it means for real life. It's designed for families, so you don't need 5 different books for 5 different kids. You can go through it together using workbooks tailored to the ages of your kids. So if you've been looking for a way to disciple your kids without adding more stress to your day, this is it. For more information, visit lifestoneministries.com/Heidi to learn more about this amazing homeschooling tool. I wonder, there are a lot of people listening, I think, that feel that stress in their marriage, but they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
They were kind of told, hey, if you just push it under or you just, you let it go. But that's not your experience, right? Your experience, and really the Bible's counsel is, you got to work this stuff out, which requires that you talk about it.
Right, absolutely. That silent or that avoidant.
See, I'm kind of a silent girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
if I'm really mad, Heidi gonna go quiet.
Yes, and I watched that in my home as a child upbringing, and it is interesting even how our parents navigated stress that informs how we do.
Absolutely.
So, or even just the roles our parents played, and so my mom was a firstborn. She didn't have a father in the home since she was 2, so she was very resourceful, resilient, a leader, type A. And then my dad was the youngest with 3 girls. And so he and my mom
People were doing stuff for him then.
Yeah, they worked real well together. Well,
Yeah.
Gabe's parents were different. Like his dad, he was the lead, he was the head. Mom came alongside. She was more soft-spoken. And then all of a sudden we come together and we're both the leader.
Yeah.
In our origin stories,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
like, oh, we're gonna have to.
You can have like a 2-headed monster.
Yeah, and yet the beauty is that, of course, I knew biblically that Gabe is the leader, but somehow my habits or even my actions didn't always show that. I would challenge him on the dumbest things, is that really how we should pull weeds or things that are not even in my realm of
or Jill will be like, could you please tell me how to drive again? Or how to park the car one more time, because I love it when you do that.
Right. So even that I think impacts a lot of how people come into marriage of and so I watched my mom be silent. I watched kind of the silent the power of the silent treatment. You could hear a pin drop and no one could say anything. And it was like you could cut the air with a knife driving to church.
Yeah.
Especially
driving to church.
Always driving to church.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesus.
And I'm so thankful that our parents they stayed together out of covenant and out of just that biblical mandate. Mm-hmm. At the same point, never should that commitment replace intimacy, replace the desire to really know and be known. And so that's what I think we have just decided with this silent or avoidant, we have to talk about the things. As hard as they are to say and as hard as they are to hear, if we're not able to show that, because the silent often is triggered by hurt. Yep. And what that means is there's some little hidden resentments that grow over time, that can become bitterness, that can become a root, or unforgiveness settles in. And all of a sudden, we don't even have a pure heart before God anymore because we're seeing our spouse in a tainted way.
So good.
Just based on hurt.
Yes.
Yeah, by pulling things from underneath the rug, right? Get them outside of the rug that you're hiding them under, because you're going to trip over the rug constantly in your relationship. Put them on the table, and let's have conversations about those things. That's helped Rebecca and I a lot. That wasn't easy in the beginning, because I don't know that we'd ever seen it modeled, but I think we just learned early in our marriage that we were one another's best friends, and we were committed. I think that covenant commitment creates a safety net space for a couple to go, okay, we're going to try to process some harder things, because I'm growing in confidence. You're not going to walk out the door.
Right.
If people have experienced somebody walking out the door the moment they shared something hard, they're going to start to build up a bit of a wall towards ever emotionally going there. But if you can cultivate, and it doesn't matter what year in your marriage are, you can begin that now, like to cultivate like a space to say, hey, I want you to feel like you can be honest with me. I know some of the things you need to tell me, maybe I don't want to hear, or they're going to feel hurtful. But if you can always have those conversations, not in an intense moment or in the middle of a fight, but you've always have a regular conversation going with your spouse, you know, through daily interaction or weekly date nights or time. Like Rebecca and I always block a day a week that we're just spending time together while the kids are at school. That's just one of our rhythms. We always know there's a space where we can come back to some deeper conversations that aren't going to be handled well in the transitions or the commute. They're going to be handled when we've got just a little more space. And that's one of the biggest challenges for couples today in fighting is they're overwhelmed, they're overscheduled. There's no time. It's literally ships passing in the night. It's running errands. It's helping the kids.
It's so
they
true.
haven't blocked enough time for there to be this cultivation of each other's heart and getting to know one another continually. And that's our biggest advice to people is if you're not talking, you're not healing, and you're not going to be talking if you haven't scheduled time to talk.
Right.
So good.
That quality time is going to come from some quantity time. You can't just jump
Actually
in the,
matters.
Yeah, you're not going to just jump in the deep end like with your kids to all of a sudden have these meaningful conversations,
Right.
and you're not going to have that with your spouse. If you don't have some margin to have some uninterrupted conversations, you'll never really get to the root of why that same conversation keeps coming up, or that same argument, or that same tension.
Trigger.
Like what's behind that? And when we started to have a curiosity for each other, this really began about 8 years ago when our kids were starting their tween years, and we just developed this motto: no topic is off limits in our home.
Yeah, we have the
because
same.
we wanted them to come to us with
so
everything
important.
they were exposed to, everything their friends might be showing them, everything they might see online. Well, that got a very lively dinner conversation around everything about sex and everything about, addictions and mental health. And all of a sudden I was like, you know what? We need more of this in our marriage, that no topic is off limits in our marriage. And we found that the freer we got with like just having this like full disclosure idea of that, like, even if you have an intrusive thought, or you are you're upset but you don't want to bring it up, or you feel a stress but you don't want to share it with me because you don't want me to feel stressed, like, let's just go ahead and decide that we're partners in this. We're tethered to one another. We're not going to react or reject what you might be willing to say or willing to share, because we want to have that same posture with our kids. Like if our kids say we're exposed to something, we're curious about it, what does this mean? We don't want to be like, oh, how dare you,
Yeah,
right?
You're never going to bring it up again.
Yeah, like
That's
if you
it.
don't have a poker face and you're just like, tell me more, help me understand.
That's so interesting.
Right. So
like
why is that
you're
different?
sweating down your back.
Yeah.
Like, great. Yeah.
Well, why would that be different with our spouse? Like if I want him to trust me and give me his heart and me do the same, then I can't reject the things the minute they come out. I need to seek to understand. And the scriptures, like Gabe always talks about, 1 Peter 3.
Yeah, 1 Peter 3:7. I mean, I for me, it was this awakening moment in our marriage to understand, that passage that says, "Husbands, cherish your wife." As a weaker vessel is some of the versions, which I don't think is speaking to weaker mentally or emotionally, but maybe physically, because I know Rebecca is emotionally got a lot more resilience than I do. But the point of that verse that caught me was it says, look, if you don't treat your wife in an understanding way, your prayers will be hindered. It's the only place in Scripture that you're told, like, here's the formula. You might be in your closet on your knees for hours, and the things you're praying for aren't reaching me because I'm looking at how you're treating your wife as a husband, and that's what's going to help me understand that you get it.
Yeah.
And you get what our relationship's about, you get what this relationship's about. And for a lot of husbands, I know that's a wake-up call to go, well, yeah, I care about my prayers being answered, but do I care enough to make sure I'm treating my wife in a way that's so attuned and cherishing? And again, these things take time.
So
in our busy lives, it's hard.
They're hard to have for all the reasons that you just outlined. I think we're busy, and when we're not busy, we're on our phones because we're just trying to like we're doom scrolling,
Yeah.
for Jay's looking for a new guitar and I'm just doing, I don't know what I'm doing. But I can remember, years ago, maybe might have been 12 years into our marriage. We'd had 4 kids by then, and my husband was a pastor, and so our lives were, we were pretty much strapped financially, and we were busy all the time, and Jay was always gone, and I was just starting out homeschooling, and so I felt like the connection point between us was really being strained. And I knew, because I could just tell my husband's body language, like something's not quite right. And I thought to myself, oh man, it's been a little bit of time since we've had sex, and I bet, and in my mind, I'm like, it's another thing I'm doing wrong. It's another area that I'm letting him down. And I'm just so tired. Like, I put the kids to bed at the end of the night, and they've touched me all day long, just touching me. And then I finally get the kids to bed and I hear him come down the hall and I'm like, oh no, turn off the light, play dead, And then, one day turns into another day. And I think Jay's parents sensed that there was like a tension between us. And Mom and Dad, called us one morning and said, hey, we're going to take the kids for the day. Why don't you guys go out?
That's a gift.
And so we went out for breakfast. We went to our little favorite cafe, and we're sitting there. And I knew we needed to talk about it, but I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want him to say, I'm disappointed, or you're not meeting I just couldn't handle it. Because I already felt like, I'm trying to do all these other things. And I was in my heart just kind of asking the Lord, help me tiptoe into this conversation. And so I leaned across Jay's, chewing on a croissant. And I lean across the table and I say, hey, babe, how would you rate our sex life on, say, a scale of 9 to 10? Right. And so what I had just done was I'd given him the ability I opened the door, let's have the conversation, but also be careful with my heart.
Yeah.
Like I just told you could rate it from 9 to 10. I didn't say, on 1 to 10, because ain't no way you're going to give me a 3 and I'm out. Like I'm going to go to Walmart or something. And Jay, he read the room. Like he picked up the cue, and we had, I think, one of the most meaningful conversations about sex in awesome. Our marriage that we had ever had. Wow, and it was awesome. a turning point. And I think that's kind of what I hear you guys saying is that one of the secrets to longevity in marriage is to be able to have these conversations, but in such a way that you guard and protect the heart of your spouse. Yeah. Because if Jay were to have said to me, really glad you brought that up. Okay, it's been like 3 weeks and I'm going to bench press the car now. Thanks a lot. Instead, he was like, I know you've been tired. Like, I remember I wanted to cry. I felt heard. I felt like he saw me. Yeah, I felt seen in that moment. And I knew this was so important to him. And I wanted him to hear from me, this is also important to me. Yeah. But please be careful with my heart. How important is it, you guys, that when a hard conversation has to happen, that we're tender with the heart of our spouse?
Absolutely. I think we are always nowadays just saying, hey, can we talk about, whatever it is? And sex is one of those things. I think for us, at year 19, I realized, we probably should have had some of these conversations about sex earlier in the marriage.
Come on.
I didn't even realize I had kind of harbored some stuff, or even just hadn't really processed with him. I probably had internalized some things or took on some pressures that may or may not have been his intention. But I kind of didn't feel the freedom to just go like, we should talk about this, so that there isn't some sense of pressure on one side or the other, or some sense of duty or obligation, because nobody wants that. But going like, what is desire? What is nurture? What is attractive to me? What is attractive to you? How can I be more of that to you, or you to me, just in the everyday life, so that in our sex life, that's invigorated. That's like a fulfillment of expression of what is already naturally a cadence that we have, because we now know each other more intimately in our emotions, so that intimately physically comes by default. Like that will come just by having the safety with one another to confide and feel heard and seen and known. And we talk about this in the book, to be seen. Our primal need is to be seen and known and loved in the absence of shame. And so when we can start to do that around any topic of inadequacy or insecurity, then all of a sudden there's a tethering to one another that makes us feel safe.
But Heidi, your stories, I think, the example for people to really understand how that happened. You had space. It was not in a heated moment. Many times we make the mistake of going deep into the the heart of a conversation at a moment where we're already overreacting.
Yeah, someone
we're
just
so
snaps.
hurt. Yeah, somebody snaps.
Yeah.
That does a lot of hurt, damage, sets back the trust in the relationship. It takes such maturity. And, all of us, there's moments where I'm like, I'm just a 12-year-old. Like I revert back to this kid's self.
Let me be 12.
and you kind of have to step up and you have to be like, no, wait, we've been married 28 years. Like maturity in this relationship is let's go for a walk and talk about this. And we're going to be side by side. I know for a lot of guys, the conversation's harder when it's face-to-face intense. Like when a woman's knows you better than anybody else, can do almost mental gymnastics,
Right,
especially
really
around
true.
the emotional.
She's got a little jujitsu going on. Yeah,
For guys, they freak out. They're kind of scared. They shut down. They don't want to overreact. They don't even know what they're thinking in the moment. It can feel overwhelming. When we go for a walk side by side, shoulder to shoulder, the conversations, I open up way more than when we're just staring at each other. And so I just recommend, if you're a wife and you're trying to figure out, man, my husband, we don't connect. He doesn't talk. Try some different environments. Like go for a walk together, or go sit beside him watching an NBA game or golf or something. I know it sounds like what a colossal waste of time. You might find that he leans over and the best conversations begin because the pressure's off a bit.
Yeah. And I agree. And what you were just talking about seeking to, love your wife in an understanding way, that's essentially telling us to seek to understand one another. And that just requires a level of curiosity in the marriage. And I've been talking to some of my friends lately that are all walking through different kind of things in their marriages. And I just am asking them, are you asking them? Because like sometimes we'll tell our husbands what we need, but we're not really asking them like, how does that hit you? Or when I said that, what did that make you feel? Or why was that triggering to you? And not in an interrogative way, because I've definitely done that, and he does not like that. But more of a going when we're all regulated, no one's offline. We're actually talking in a calm. We're more genuinely, like we would with our teen kids, like we would with our child. Go, hey, what do you love about that? What about that's really hard? Why is this topic really hard? Do you know why?
Yeah.
And it's just really, truly seeking to understand, being curious so that you can have empathy, like genuine empathy for one another. You're not like, oh, that must be so terrible, but you really don't understand. But when you ask questions and you keep pressing in without reaction or retaliation or some form of judgment, then you can get to the root of a lot of things that I think people will sit on for years.
Oh, absolutely.
There will be this great divide on how they see money or how they see parenting, on how they see career. There will be these resentments that might be a mile high, but they're hidden. But if you could just go, hey, let's talk about career. Like, are you happy with that? Do you like the roles that I play and that you play? Do you wish that you had a little bit more of a role here or there? I mean, why does it have to be so off limits? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be weaponized. It could just be like, I want to know your heart more and your desires more and your intention with that. And I just think that becomes this beautiful, disarming way to get to the heart of one another. And we have healed as a result of that. And now we are much better at asking questions, even now. Sometimes when we start to get a little like this, we're like, okay, we need to come back to this and go like, why does that bother you so much? And then I'll have to ask the Lord, I don't know, God, why does that one thing bother me so much?
So you're making a really good point. I love that you just said, I have to go to the Lord and say, Lord, why is this bothering me? I was saying to a friend the other day, because, I think, Jay and I will celebrate our 36th anniversary this summer.
Wow.
And I was telling, it was my daughter. I was talking to my daughter. So I have a 34-year-old daughter. She's been married, I think, 12 years. And we were talking about, she's about, I think, 7 or 8 weeks postpartum. And she's like, Mom, this marriage thing. This is wow. And she's got a wonderful husband. He's a pastor too. And they have 5 kids, right? So busy, busy, busy life. And I was telling her, I said, you know what, Savannah, I have asked the Lord. Because we were talking about just some really specific things inside of her marriage that she was like, Mom, can I get some, instruction or some encouragement? I said, I don't know that I have an answer, but I can tell you I have gone to the Lord with the most personal, the most specific, because God already knows, right? He already knows. Like he's seen me in my marriage. He's watching what's happening between me and my husband. I said, you can actually take this thing, this really intimate thing that sort of scares you, that you're like, I don't know what to do with this, and ask the Lord to give you a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Because God cares about those parts of your marriage that even right now you might be afraid to voice, and ask the Lord, give me the voice.
Yeah.
Like, show me how to voice this with my husband so that we can be on the same page again. Because the enemy will take anything and divide you if he can.
Yeah, the enemy will make accusations against your spouse and get you to agree with them.
Yes.
And then we're on his game, playing a game where, you're having thoughts in your own mind. Well, man, another wife would have respected me more in that conversation, or would have
Jennifer's
appreciated.
husband, he brings her flowers.
Yeah, right. You start to play out these narratives very quickly, and you start to create that wall and that division and that separation. That's what he loves, is that isolation. And people can go for a long time like that. And so that's why our hope is for people to go, look, recognize it quicker when that's happening, and then apologize first for anything that you're holding on to. And that's our motto in our marriage now is whoever apologizes first wins. Okay? So
it's always a competition.
Whenever we have like this disagreement, try to own your part. Maybe you don't think you had a lot to do with it, but
you're making it sound easy.
Ooh, it is
You're
not.
making it sound easy, but
it's very hard.
I can't imagine, Jay and I racing to see who's going to apologize for it. Although he's going to hear this and be like,
I would say my apologies are a little more reluctant. But when they come, they're genuine. And it's also because I do believe the Lord reveals what he wants to heal. And no better person to expose that than the person who knows you the most.
I want to take a moment to say thank you to our sponsor today. Today's show is being sponsored in part by my friends at GiveSendGo. And it's a pretty amazing partnership because months ago, before I received my medical diagnosis, we had been hoping to partner with this amazing company. And I had no idea that I was going to be on the receiving end of a GiveSendGo campaign. But I can tell you it's been an incredible blessing for me. And I love what these guys are doing. They are really crowdfunding with a gospel message and sharing the light of Christ and helping us fulfill the mandate in Galatians 6:2, where we are really commanded to bear one another's burdens, and in so doing, fulfill the law of Christ. One of the things that's awesome about GiveSendGo is that they have a prayer team that you can join and pray for the campaigns that you see online. So even if you can't give right now, you can pray. There is power in your prayers, and I love what the Lord is doing through the platform at GiveSendGo. Check them out at GiveSendGo.com.
And so we would have conflict about money for years. And he would just get so irritated. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm so weird about how much the eggs cost. I know the per ounce, whatever. And then all of a sudden, one day I just asked the Lord, I'm like, what is this? And he gave me a picture of me standing in that financial aid line. And I was like, oh, money for me meant survival, and then it meant freedom. It meant I needed that for to be independent, to stay in college. I wasn't going to be able to stay in college. So I was like, oh wow, that's a really loaded thing. But the Lord was
there's a hurt in there.
Yeah. And I think anytime there's a resistance to something, there's a wound attached to that, especially when it's this popular phrase in psychology is if it's hysterical, it's historical. So there, 10% of that conflict is about what's happening right now. It is not about not about the drive-through. It is not about the dishwasher. It is not about
it's not about the price of beans.
Right. There's 90% of that triggering that's coming from an origin thing that you've never quite been able to work out or work through. And the Lord just reminded me in that moment, he's like, I am always your provider. I have always been your provision. I have always gone before you and brought people around. I've been a step ahead of you everywhere you go. He doesn't leave the righteous forsaken or the seed begging bread. And I think that went before me. That's in my line a few generations
mine
back.
Too.
And I was like, how kind of God to kind of make that revelation clear. And then allow me to confess and just declare, yes, you are our source. You are our healer. And so now there is a freedom that starts to follow that. A little less grasping, a little less defensiveness. And
a little more trust.
Yeah. And so it might just seem like, oh, that's just her thing. And I could feel shame in it. Like, oh, you need to go work on that. Whatever that is, that's weird, But a bigger thing is going I wonder if the Lord wants to show you that root wound. Yeah. And then you see where he's always been there. And he is going to keep you and hold you through this.
And as her husband, her being able to share that story with me gives me different insight into why does she react this way. It seems odd to me. I didn't grow up in an environment where we were having to think about some of the things she's had to live with and think about. So now as her husband, I can have compassion versus resentment about some of her behaviors. I can be a part of what God might use to heal that part of her that he's working on. But her ability to do self-reflection and go, why am I doing it? Invite the Lord into that, because I wouldn't have had the answer for that. But for her to start to see dots connecting and express it to me, now there's opportunity for healing. And but all that takes some time. It takes work. It takes intention. It takes just not accepting status quo and saying this is just how it's always going to be. We cannot get resigned to our situations and our marriages. We have to understand God has more for us.
Boy, so true. I love that you titled your book, The Fight for Us, because it really is. I mean, you really do have to fight for it. And I think that the older I get and the longer that we're married, the deeper in love we have become. I'm always telling people this, like, Jay's 57, I'm 55. We're having better sex now than we've ever had. Like, I was just having lunch with Lisa, and she was just like, I don't know how I got to be the woman that everyone wants to talk about sex over 60. And like, because people just want to know that we're not just going to get old and wither up, and we're not going to enjoy each other anymore. And I think that is a fight too. All of it is just such a fight just to sort of stay in there. I think I told you guys last time I saw you that I had recently been diagnosed with a tumor. So I'm going in for like a major surgery in July. And I mean, it has been such a scary thing for us to walk through. And the first couple of weeks were the worst. And I mean, I was crying for no reason. Just, I'm terrified. I've never been here before. And my husband did not know what to do with me. Right. And I finally just, I came up to our bedroom one night and he was crying. And I hardly ever see him cry. Like, in all of the years that we have been married, he cries for joy. Like, he cries when he's like, look at all of our grandchildren. That'll make him cry. Like,
that's sweet.
But he was crying, and I was like, honey, he's like, I don't know how to help you. Like, I don't know how to help you walk through this. And I so appreciated just his willingness to I said, I just need to walk into this room and turn the light on. I need to be able to walk around. I need to be able to process. I need to be able to say all the things that scare you, and they're also scaring me, so that I feel like you understand me. And it just, this flood of just, all right, so let's walk into the room together and let's turn on the light together. And I think there is a helping one another, like a carrying of a burden that happens inside of marriage between a husband and wife that can't happen in any other relationship. And I want to get your comments on this, because I heard my friend Matt Walsh talking about this with Tucker Carlson the other day. They were talking about, masculinity in the culture. And listen, I like Matt. He's a friend. But he said something that just really just ate at me. Like, he was talking about stoicism and how he's just a believer. And this is a really interesting question. I guess I'll start with you, Gabe. He was saying he doesn't believe that that men should expose their emotion, which I actually agree to a certain point. Like, no wife wants to come home to a sobbing husband that's like, I want, he's like, I want to be strong for my wife. I want to kind of carry her burdens. And so Tucker said, so if you found out that you had late stage cancer, you just wouldn't tell anybody? And Matt was like, no, I wouldn't, because that's not your burden to carry. This is my burden. And I was like, hold up. I actually don't think that's biblical. Like, the Bible says we're supposed to carry one another's burdens. I think even more so in marriage. Yeah. And I think about you kind of carrying Rebecca's burden of, why am I so anxious about the price of eggs, and really being willing to come alongside her and carry that with her.
Yep. How
important is it, Gabe, that in that marriage relationship, we don't move into the corners of stoicism and say, well, I'm going to carry this burden, and you carry this and I'll carry that. Yeah. But that we carry each other's burden.
It's so important. I grew up as a stoic, I would say, given how you're describing
Matt
it.
Matt will relate to
someone who, thinking about anything painful in the past always seemed like a bad idea. It never felt like it was making progress. It felt like I was a victim. And so we can't look backwards to just blame and become a victim. That's not the point of looking to our story. It's to better understand what shaped you, what shaped your perspective, your way of seeing the world. I had a lot of experience in the world of like self-talk and positivity and sales. Like, what you think is what's going to happen, and a lot of that. And that almost also made me not want to talk about pain, because I'm like, if I talk about it,
then that's what it's going to be.
I'm making it real.
Yeah.
And then we have to deal with it.
Well, there's a lot of people listening to this that are like, oh, hey, yeah.
Yeah. And that worked well, I would say, in some of my ambition. It worked well with building things, running companies. I think a lot of professional, like CEOs, have this track record of regarding emotion is I'm not going to show much of that. I just keep moving forward. But those same skills do not benefit a marriage.
Don't translate.
No, not at all. Because I think what I had to learn is to go from this idea of feelings were negative to going, no, God's given us the gift of feeling so we can know our heart. We can understand how he's trying to communicate to us our feelings. Dr. Chip Dodd talks about this, that we're sensing and feeling beings who learn how to think. Whereas I kind of grew up thinking, that I'm a thinking being and my heart's there, but I'm going to kind of ignore it because that's never good. It's like, no, God talks about the heart throughout Scripture. It's way more than he talks about the mind and how important the heart is. So us developing a skill as men, I think it takes a little more effort probably for a lot of men to understand our feelings, why we're feeling them, because God actually gives us the feelings to point us back towards relationship. And I don't think he's meant for us to carry burdens alone. If I had late stage cancer, I'd want all my friends to at least know I was walking through it. Because you really don't receive rescue, you don't receive help, you don't receive the encouragement, the love that is really meant for you when you don't put yourself in that vulnerable position to say, hey, I need it. And so I think that's a danger in going down the path of holding on to your feelings too tightly and not sharing them.
So good.
Yeah, if you can't grieve, you can't be comforted. And Jesus, who has all authority been given to him on heaven and on earth, is a man of sorrows, well acquainted with grief. And so he comforts us so we can comfort others. That's not gender specific. We are all sons and daughters with limits that need God. David was a man, God's bestie, who would lament.
Yeah.
He withheld nothing from God.
That's why we love the Psalms.
And even the root word stoicheia, we studied this some in seminary. It's kind of in that same realm of the demonic. There is this kind of like, I think, therefore I am, right? Our identity is all in the cerebral. It's not in an embodied expression. And God made us with all these ability to feel and the heart, and out of the heart, the mouth speaks, and out of the heart is the wellspring of life. So to cut that off or to shut that down is compartmentalizing something that God never intended in the first place. Now, should we be ruled by the emotions in the moment? No. Right. And that's even modeled in the Psalms, right? If David is in despair or whatever psalmist is in despair, he will inevitably turn that despair into declaration.
Yes, absolutely.
And God, but God, I praise you that even if I have this cancer diagnosis, that you are Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals, or El Roy, the God who sees, and that I can put my trust in you, and I can cast all my cares upon you. So you're not denying that there's a loss and a longing. Jesus didn't deny that in the garden. He's like, if it be your will, take this cup. And he sweat drops of blood while he cried. So Jesus is giving us a full example, but then going, not my will, but your will. So the fullness, I think, of embodying emotion in the way that God intended is honoring. It's honoring to ourselves so that we understand fully how God demonstrated that as in human form. But then it helps us relate to one another in such a sacrificial way, a mutual submission way, this idea of outdoing one another and showing honor, and whenever possible, live at peace. It shows vulnerability. And vulnerability is so important for us as sons and daughters because we're reminded that we are creatures in his image with limits, and therefore we can bear one another's burdens in love.
So good. We've got just a few minutes left, and there's so many things that I wanted to ask you guys about, but you touched on something really early on in the interview that I wrote down I wanted to get back to, and that is the issue of submission. This is not something that we like to talk about, right, in Christian circles. And I think, I told you guys before we started recording, I grew up in a very unhappy home, an abusive environment. My parents divorced when I was 18 years old. And I did not see marriage modeled well. And so when Jay and I got married, I was like, submission? No thanks, man. I've seen it. Don't like it. And yet God says that the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the husband, right? And so I'm wondering if you guys can touch on this, both of you, just in the last 10 minutes or so that we have, so that I know that there are people, this issue, especially in the wake of the feminist movement, which has so hurt women and so hurt marriages, that this is still God's beautiful design. So do you touch on this in the book and tell us a little bit about what this looks like in your marriage?
Yeah, we try to describe a mutual marriage. What does it mean to be mutually submitted to one another? Me as the head, submitted to the Lord. when I'm leading in that way, it's very natural and easy for Rebecca to submit to my leadership because she understands she's really following the Lord through what he's guiding and directing. When I'm not doing that and I'm just powering up to say, hey, I'm the leader here. Why don't you just follow what I'm doing?
How's that work for you?
Yeah, it doesn't, right? Or it creates lots of resistance. I heard someone say,
how's that working for you?
I think this is such a good way to think about submission is we're both submitted to the Lord and entrusting ourselves to one another.
Yeah.
So our submission is to one another. There's another passage that talks about submit to one another, right?
Yes.
In our sexual life, that's also part of what the Scripture describes. So there's some mutual submission. But that submission is really unto the Lord, and then we're entrusting one another with that. And that we are both following what the Lord wants. And
I mean, it's always set up, outdo one another with showing honor. So this idea of love never fails, is patient, it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. But in Ephesians 4, it starts with mutual submission, and then it goes into wives submit to husbands, and then husbands submit to wives in the way that Christ loved the church. And so what that's telling me that we do this less unto one another, and we do it unto Christ. And so that means I want to honor Gabe. I admire him. I want to trust his leadership. And he, therefore, is also required to give his life for me.
That's right. He actually has
to take a bullet.
He has the harder role.
To take a bullet. And that passage was also written when it was not common for women to be treated with any level of dignity, any level of submission. So it was, while it begins with mutual submission, wives submit to husbands, it was really a call to the men, like, you're going to actually give your life up. You're going to lay your life and take death in honor of your wife. And there was just no paradigm for that. There was no framework for them. Women were already kind of esteemed in that way as like, of course they're going to submit because that's the culture we live in. Now it's kind of reversed. Now women are like, that's not the culture we live in, and we don't want to do that. Right? So it's just so wild that when these passages were written and who they were written to, they're going to hit different to the listener then than they are now. But the fact remains that the word it stays the same, is that I trust and I lean into him. I lean into his leadership. I do it unto Christ. And he, therefore, also lays down his life for me. And that's wild. And no feminist movement is talking about that. Like, if you had a man that's like, I will take a bullet for you. You have my honor. I'm a man of integrity. I'm a man of conviction. I will give my life for you and the kids. It's kind of hard to not follow that as a leader.
I was just going to say, I don't know a woman, a godly woman, who doesn't long to submit to the loving leadership of a godly husband. Right. And we've really literally been wired that way. My grandparents were married nearly 75 years. And my granddad, early on in our marriage, Jay and I went over there after a Bible study, one night. I think we'd been married maybe 2 or 3 years. And they were talking about submission, and I'm just fuming in my seat. It's so stupid. The Apostle Paul, what does he know? We're supposed to should be quiet now. I mean, I was just like all the way to my grandparents' house. I was just like, and another thing, And so we get there, and Jay was just like, hey, Grandpa, looking at me like I brought her,
Work on her.
Right, work on
Help
her.
me.
And my grandmother, I mean, she was a spitfire. So my granddad was a pastor, and my grandmother was a Bible teacher. And so I grew up, just watching the two of them, very spirited, both of them. But my I'll never forget, as long as I live, he looked at me and he said, I'm like, what's a submission thing? I mean, honestly, do you understand the Apostle Paul? This guy was a misogynist. He was a chauvinist, all the things. And my granddad just said, Heidi, in a healthy marriage, the issue of submission will never come up because your husband will know that you are for him in the way that you honor him and respect him, in the way that you talk to him, in the way that you talk about him, in the way that you listen to him. And the same will be true of him as he looks at you. Yeah. And he said, in all the years that you have seen me and your grandma, when have you ever seen us argue about this? And I was like,
Yeah, that's good.
He was right. Like, because their marriage was healthy and they were submitting to each other, but there was never a question as to whether my grandfather was the leader in their home. Like, no one wondered who was the leader in my home. But I'll tell you what, my granddad would have never gone out and bought a car without talking to grandma about it and been like, sorry, we got a $300 a month car payment, live with it. Because he loved her. Right. And I love to see them model that. And I think maybe it's less about, because you would never go submit woman. Like, no godly man would ever say that. to his wife ever.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of replacing obedience for mutual like honor and respect.
Yes, yeah, right.
And so it's like we're almost acting as if that relationship is like a parent to a child, and
Right,
it's not.
it's
That's
not.
not ever been what it's about. In fact, in the beginning in the garden, it's like I'll make a helper suitable for him. It's not, and that's Ezer Kenegdo, and helper was even used for God. So we talk about that right from the
Holy
get go.
Spirit.
Yeah. So it's like there's such a tethering of partnership here. There's this mutuality of like, yeah, we don't make big life. Gabe, he's usually first, and it takes me a minute. But he doesn't just run charging ahead if I'm like, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a really good thing because it is an honoring to not. And I think it has been abused, unfortunately, where the man's like,
for
what
sure.
my say is what we're doing, and you guys are going to just come. And
Sorry
you're-
you don't like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get over it. You know, and that will grow.
Yes.
Unfortunately, some resentment, or if a wife doesn't feel like she has a voice, that she can't be the wife of the home that still has discernment, still has wisdom, still has input. So that mutuality is so important. And you're right; those roles they just naturally happen in the way that they do, and we're so thankful because, like we said, we're both leaders, and yet it's been so good for me. It's been so good for me to humble myself and go, I choose to lean in and trust you. Your conviction is like amazing, like just the way you're a man of your word, you're a man of character. You care for people so well. I admire that and I respect it. And so, you know, sure, we might have different opinions on how to do things, but in the end, like the big things, always, it's it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's so true. And also, you know, you can tell them, and you got, you know, and you're pretty good looking while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, kind of got this Clark Kent thing going on as we're getting older. It's really important. You guys have done such a beautiful job. And in writing this book, I think it's so important. The culture has maligned marriage for so long, and yet God created marriage that we would thrive. I mean, it's His design for human flourishing. I love that you guys have written about this. Again, the book is called The Fight for Us, Overcome What Divides to Build a Marriage That Thrives. Rebecca and Gabe, you guys have just been a delight. Thank you for letting me come into your studio here in Franklin and just interview you. People want to find you guys online. Because we got some, I mean, I could do this for hours more because I want to talk about I want to talk about all the things you guys are doing. But if people want to find you guys online, where's the best place to do that?
Well, you can find me at RebeccaLyons.com or just at Rebecca Lyons on social.
Yep. And then same for me, GabeLyons.com, social, but then Think Media, which we didn't talk about much, but I'd encourage people to go explore.
In a nutshell,
that.
tell us what it is.
Yeah, so Think is designed, it's spelled THINQ, but it's for 22 years we've been leading an organization to help leaders, families, parents, teachers, people in entrepreneurship, business, wherever you're called to lead, to know how to navigate culture faithfully and talk about all the issues. So we talk about no topics off limits in our home. It's no topics off limit in the Think environment.
I love
and
that.
we try to address the issues and the questions that likely parents are wrestling with today that their church may not be talking about it, but I know you're talking about it, and I'll say we're talking about it. And so people can go explore. It's free, over 1,000 talks, a lot like TED Talks, if people are familiar with that. We've been doing that for over 20 years. A lot of short form talks, all designed to help people create conversations that will lead them towards wisdom if they can just create the space for people to talk about these difficult conversations.
Wow, I love that. You guys are a national treasure. Thank you guys for being on my show in your studio today. I really appreciate it. Let's do it again.
Thanks,
Thank
Heidi.
you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We're going to link back to this book in mentions today. So HeidiSt.John.com/mentions. If you guys have questions for me, I'll answer them on Mondays. You can go to HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope this has been an encouragement and a blessing to you. Listen, love your people well, you guys. You got one shot at it. Do it well. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you right back here again at the intersection of faith and culture.
Parents of teens, listen up, because I have found an awesome Bible discipleship program that I think you're going to love. If you want your teens to own their faith instead of just regurgitating Bible facts, you need to know about RVL Discipleship, the curriculum. It's a powerful new curriculum that's been designed for homeschooled teens from our friends at Focus on the Family. Each lesson is taught by awesome Bible teacher Ray Vanderlyn. His semester-long course takes teens beyond fill-in-the-blank lessons to real-life application application, helping them live out their faith with boldness and purpose. RVL curriculum is flexible, parent-friendly, and deeply engaging because it's been designed to spark real conversations about faith between you and your teens. Right now, you guys can get 2 free sample lessons at rvlcurriculum.com/HSJ, plus 10% off when you purchase the curriculum with code Heidi10. You guys, discipleship matters. Let's raise our kids to become lifelong disciples of Jesus. Go to rvlcurriculum.com/HSJ today.